This video is from fall 2024, working through this example from this packet. So work with me, people. You need your, that's quite the excitement. You need your T table, and you need your reference sheet for confidence intervals for means. So the first thing I'm going to do, and the first thing you should do, is read through the problem, underline the important information that you need. And we're going to do step 1 to clearly write down a summary of the given information. We see that the sample mean, so that's the symbol for sample mean, versus the mu, which is the population mean. The sample mean is 75. What are we talking about here? Grades, mean grade on an exam. And then our sample size, how many pieces of data we have, not data from here, like I'm not counting the numbers I give you, but in our sample, how many things are there? So there's 20. The sample standard deviation, so S is for the sample standard deviation versus the sigma, that's for the population standard deviation. So the standard deviation is 15. That's 15 points, right? It's related to here. So remember, standard deviation is just, what is it? It represents the spread of your data. So the smaller the value here, the more scrunched up your data is. All your data is concentrated together. The larger a value is in the context of the problem, the more spread out the data is, okay? And your confidence level is 90% or 0.9, and that's given to you. Okay, we're on step 2. We have to see, do we know the sigma or the population standard deviation, maybe from past information? Do we know the size of our sample? Okay, for us, we don't know the population standard deviation, and so there we're just forced, not forced, but we use the T table. It's more forgiving than the Z table in terms of how this plays out here. Because we're using the T table, we need the degrees of freedom, which is always one less than how many pieces of information you have in your sample. So our degrees of freedom is 19. Alpha we're going to need, remember alpha is, what do we have here, 90%? So if 90% is our middle space of the data we want, then we have a remaining 10% here. So half of the white space, the rest of the data is 0.05. And so now we've done step 2, we're moving on to step 3. So I'm not using the Z table this time, I'm using the T table, and I'm on step 3 of this sheet, and I have to figure this out. Yeah, so then now I'm off to my Z table, or T table. The version of the T table we're using here tells us, actually, it does a lot of the work, or it does a nice work for us. It tells you the confidence level on the bottom, and that takes into account doing some sort of halving of certain things. So other tables are set up differently. The degrees of freedom, you have to be in that particular row, and your confidence level, you have to be in that particular column. So our degrees of freedom was 19, our confidence level was, where is it, 90%. So I have to be in row 19, and I have to be in the 90 over here, which is this one. So I travel, again, you notice there's nice shading here, so I'm in the second to bottom of this shaded part, and 90%. So my T value, my T score is 1.729. Okay, make sure you understand how I got that. So now on to step 4. So we read the problem, we've figured out some information, we got our T score. Remember the T score is like the Z score, it's what value down here on the number line gives you the desired area you want. Okay, so now we're on the margin of error. Remember, the margin of error is what you're adding and subtracting from the sample mean. So the sample mean is X bar. Sample mean, what you're adding and subtracting from the sample mean. So this is shorthand notation for I'm going to add it and then I'm going to subtract it to give you your range of numbers. Okay, so the definition of the margin of error is that T score times this standard deviation over square root of n. Write it down, the numbers, to see, check your errors or to communicate what you're doing, and I got a margin of error of 5.799. So we're on step 5. I found my margin of error, so again, I'm going to add and subtract it from my sample mean. So communicate what you're doing. That is going to be my confidence interval. So I subtract it, that's my lower bound. I add it, that's my upper bound. So the final step is summarizing in the context of the problem. Remember your summary, you should have units, you should have like what you're talking about so somebody understands what just went on, right? And so I wrote, we are 90% confident, so that 90% comes from the confidence level. We are 90% confident that the true mean exam grade is between 69.201 and 80.799%, or points. I don't know, I didn't write this very carefully. You don't know if that's points, maybe you don't know how much it's out of, or if it's percent. So in real life or whatever, with a better teacher, you would know the more specific context of this, but those are the values of the range.